A nurse stayed late to comfort a lonely patient, not knowing he was a widowed millionaire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It was almost midnight at St. Mary's Hospital. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, washing the white hallway in a cold glow. Most of the staff had already gone home, their footsteps fading beyond the double doors. Only the rhythmic beeping of heart monitors and the distant hiss of oxygen filled the silence. Clara Monroe, a 26-year-old nurse, tightened the elastic on her ponytail and exhaled. Her shift had ended an hour ago, yet she could not bring herself to leave. She passed the nurse's station, clutching her worn notebook against her chest. On the counter sat a paper cup of coffee gone cold. The aroma of antiseptic lingered in the air. Through the glass door at the end of the corridor, she saw room 406. The patient inside had not spoken a word in weeks. Most nurses called him the quiet man. His name was Ethan Hale. The medical chart said he was 54, recovering from heart surgery. Clara only knew that he was polite, solitary, and always awake long after midnight. She hesitated outside his door. The others had said he preferred silence, that he never wanted visitors. But tonight the loneliness inside that room felt almost visible, like a shadow stretching beneath the door. Clara knocked gently and peeked in. The room was dim, the machines casting pale light across his face. Ethan Hale lay still, eyes open but distant, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for someone who would never come. His wedding ring glimmered faintly under the monitor's glow. Clara stepped closer. "Mr. Hale, it is late," she whispered. He turned his head slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. There was something fragile in that look, the quiet exhaustion of a man who had lost more than health. Clara checked the IV line, adjusted the monitor, then lingered. She should have left. Her apartment was across town, and she had another shift at 7 in the morning. But she could not walk away. Instead, she sat on the edge of the visitor's chair, her voice gentle. "Would you like me to read something? It might help you sleep." He did not answer, but he did not look away either. Clara opened her small notebook, the one she carried for long nights like this. Inside were short poems and favorite quotes from her mother, who had passed away when Clara was 16. She began softly, her voice breaking the sterile silence. "When you feel alone, remember every heartbeat is proof that you are still needed by this world." The words floated between them, tender and steady. Ethan's eyes closed for the first time that night. His breathing slowed, his chest rising and falling in calm rhythm. Clara smiled faintly, closing the notebook. "Good night, Mr. Hale," she whispered. As she stood to leave, she felt the faintest pressure on her wrist. Startled, she looked down. Ethan's hand had moved, his fingers curling around hers, weak but deliberate. She froze, heart racing, unsure if it was reflex or something more. He did not open his eyes, but his grip lingered, as if asking her to stay. Clara whispered, "I will stay a little longer then." She pulled the chair closer to his bedside, resting her notebook near the monitor. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window, echoing the beat of the heart monitor. And in that quiet hospital room, for the first time in a very long while, two lonely souls simply listened to the same silence. The next morning, the sun rose behind the pale gray windows of St. Mary's Hospital. The world outside was waking, but inside the ward, the air still carried the quiet of the night before. Clara Monroe stood by the staff lockers, rubbing her sore shoulders and staring at the half-empty cup of coffee she had forgotten hours ago. Her shift had officially ended at midnight, yet she was still here at 7 in the morning, her scrubs wrinkled, her hair loose from the tie. She had stayed longer than anyone else again. The senior nurse, Miss Daniels, walked by holding a clipboard. Her tone was brisk, but not unkind. "Clara, you cannot keep doing this. You were scheduled to leave at midnight. We are not paid for overtime unless it is approved." Clara gave a tired smile. "I know, Miss Daniels. I just did not want Mr. Hale to be alone." Miss Daniels sighed. "You have a soft heart, Clara, but you will burn yourself out if you keep giving more than you have." Clara nodded, though her thoughts were far away. She remembered the faint squeeze of Ethan Hale's hand last night, the fragile warmth that had startled her. She had sat there until the rain stopped, listening to his breathing even out, watching the soft green light of the heart monitor blink in rhythm. That small human contact had reminded her why she had chosen nursing in the first place. Her mother used to say, "Medicine can heal the body, but kindness keeps the soul alive." Clara smiled faintly at the memory. She gathered her bag and walked toward the hospital exit, but paused by the window overlooking the city. The early commuters were already moving, umbrellas flashing under the streetlights. Her phone buzzed with a reminder her rent was due in 3 days, and the balance in her account would not cover it. She also had to send money for her younger brother's college books. The pressure felt like a stone on her chest. Outside the glass, the reflection showed a young woman who looked stronger than she felt. 26 years old, working double shifts, chasing the belief that compassion still mattered in a place ruled by protocol and paperwork. Sometimes she wondered if anyone noticed her efforts, or if her kindness only made her seem naive. At the bus stop, the cold air bit through her thin jacket. Her phone buzzed again. Her brother Liam's message popped up. "Morning, Clara. I got into the advanced chemistry class. I just need 2 more textbooks. I can pay you back next month." Clara typed back quickly, "Do not worry. I will find a way." Then she turned off the screen before the total in her bank account could make her panic. The bus came, creaking and old, and she sank into the last seat by the window. As the city rolled by, she leaned her head against the cool glass. In her mind, replayed the image of Ethan Hale's face, calm but lonely, the faint grip of his hand. There had been something in that gesture, trust, or maybe fear of being forgotten. When Clara reached her small apartment, the morning light filled the kitchen through thin curtains. She made a simple breakfast of toast and black coffee, her thoughts drifting back to the hospital. Her roommate had already left for her office job, leaving the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. On the table lay a half-finished sketch she had drawn on an old envelope, a window, rain outside, and a man lying in a hospital bed. She did not realize she had drawn Ethan Hale until she looked closer. The pencil had captured the same distant expression she had seen the night before. Clara shook her head, folding the paper away. She told herself not to get attached to patients. It was the first rule in every nursing manual. Keep your distance, protect your heart. But she had broken that rule the moment she stayed after hours, just to keep someone company. Later that afternoon, she returned for another shift. The hospital corridors buzzed with daytime activity, doctors moving quickly, gurneys rolling past. When she reached room 406, she hesitated again. Ethan Hale was awake, sitting slightly up, reading a small card that must have been left by a volunteer. His voice, low and steady, startled her. "You were here last night, were you not?" Clara froze, then smiled nervously. "Yes, Mr. Hale. I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable." "Oh?" He studied her for a long moment, eyes thoughtful. "Most people do not stay when they are not required to." Clara met his gaze. "Sometimes comfort matters more than policy." A faint smile touched his lips, the kind that carried both gratitude and sadness. For the rest of that day, Clara went about her rounds, yet her thoughts kept circling back to room 406. There was something in the way Ethan Hale spoke, slow and deliberate, that made her wonder who he had been before illness confined him to that bed. He seemed educated, composed, and oddly self-contained, like a man used to leading others but now forced into stillness. That night, when she clocked out, Clara lingered again at the nurse's station. Miss Daniels noticed. "Still here, Clara?" "Yes, ma'am. Just finishing the reports." But the truth was simpler. She was waiting until the ward grew quiet, until she could walk by his room once more. Not because it was her duty, but because something in her heart refused to leave him alone in that silence. The days at St. Mary's Hospital began to blend together, one quiet sunrise melting into another. Clara Monroe's routine became a rhythm she could almost feel in her bones. Morning rounds, patient charts, medication logs, and then, when her shift ended, the soft footsteps down the hall, toward room 406. No one had asked her to stay. No one even noticed she did. But every evening, when the corridor emptied and the hum of machines grew louder, she found herself drawn back to Ethan Hale's bedside. Each night, their small conversations grew a little longer. At first, it was only pleasantries. "How are you feeling tonight?" she would ask. He would answer, in short sentences, his voice rough from disuse. better than yesterday. But as days turned into weeks, something began to shift. Ethan started asking about her life outside the hospital. "Do you live nearby, Nurse Monroe?" Clara hesitated. "Close enough. I share an apartment with a friend. Nothing fancy. And what do you do when you are not saving people?" She smiled faintly. "I play music, or I try to. Violin. It used to be my mother's." That night, for the first time, Ethan smiled fully. "I used to love the violin. My late wife played. I have not heard one in years." His voice caught slightly at the word wife. Clara looked down, unsure what to say. "I am sorry for your loss," she whispered. He nodded once. "So am I." The following evening, she brought her violin to the hospital. The old case was scratched and faded, but inside, the wood gleamed softly, polished by years of care. She did not tell anyone. She waited until her shift ended and the ward grew still. Ethan was awake, staring at the rain against the window. When he saw the violin, his brows lifted. "You brought it." "I thought it might help you rest," Clara said, setting the bow across the strings. She played a slow, gentle melody, one her mother used to hum while washing dishes. The sound filled the sterile room, weaving through the hiss of oxygen and the steady beep of the heart monitor. For a few minutes, the hospital did not feel like a place of illness. It felt human. When she finished, Ethan's eyes were glistening. He cleared his throat softly. "You have a gift, Clara. You could be performing in concert halls instead of here." She smiled. "Music does not pay the rent. Nursing does." He chuckled quietly. "A practical dreamer. That is rare." After that night, the violin became part of her visits. Sometimes she played softly while checking his IV line. Sometimes she just left the instrument nearby, like a promise that she would return. Other nurses began to whisper, calling her the musician, and teasing her gentle patience, but she did not care. There was something about this quiet man that made her want to bring light into his darkened world. One afternoon, while she changed the dressing on his arm, Ethan spoke again. "Do you ever get tired of helping people?" Clara looked up, surprised by the question. "Sometimes, but then I remember that someone once helped me when I needed it most." He studied her face. "Who was that?" "My mother," Clara said softly. "She used to say healing others is how we stay alive ourselves." Ethan turned away for a moment, eyes shadowed. "She was a wise woman." "She was. She died when I was 16. A pause followed, filled only by the steady hum of the machines. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "You remind me of her. My wife, I mean. She believed the same thing." Later that evening, as Clara gathered her things, Ethan called out, "Clara!" It was the first time he had said her name. She turned, startled. "Thank you," he said simply, "for staying." Her heart swelled at the quiet sincerity in his tone. She nodded. "You are welcome, Mr. Hale. I will see you tomorrow." Oh, that night, as she walked out of the hospital, the city lights shimmered through the drizzle. For the first time in months, she did not feel exhausted. She felt purpose. The next morning, Dr. Harris, the head of neurology, stopped Clara in the hallway. "Monroe," he said, tapping the folder in his hand. "Our patient in room 406, his vitals have improved significantly. His heart rhythm is stronger, his blood pressure stable." Clara smiled, a quiet pride warming her chest. "That is wonderful news, doctor." Harris nodded thoughtfully. "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." He seems more alive. That evening, when she entered the room, Ethan was sitting upright for the first time, his color stronger, his expression calm. He gestured toward the chair beside him. "You look tired. Sit down." Clara laughed softly. "I could say the same to you. I have been sleeping better," he said, his voice lighter. "The music helps." "Lou?" She placed her violin case on the table. "Then I will keep playing until you are well enough to complain about it." Ethan chuckled, and for a brief moment, the room filled with something rare and fragile hope. As Clara drew the bow across the strings again, she felt the rhythm of the monitor match the music's tempo, each heartbeat steady. Alive. Real. She did not know why, but it felt like more than recovery. It felt like two broken lives quietly learning how to heal together. The following weeks brought small miracles that no chart could fully capture. Ethan Hale, once silent and withdrawn, began to speak more each day. He asked about the other patients, about Clara's brother, about the songs she played. His strength returned slowly, but his curiosity returned faster. The nurses began to call him the gentleman in 406 instead of the quiet man. Clara noticed every small change. The first morning he managed to sit without assistance. The first time he asked to walk a few steps by himself. Every milestone felt personal, like watching someone step back into the world after being lost in fog. She was proud, though she tried not to show it. Her role was to care for his health, not to feel attached. But some nights, when she played the violin softly beside his bed, she caught herself wondering what his life had been before this hospital room. One rainy evening, the question slipped out. "What did you do before you came here?" Ethan smiled faintly, eyes still closed as he listened to her music. "Too much work. Too little living." "That sounds like half the city," Clara said, amused. "Perhaps," he answered, "but I built something that cost me more than I expected." She tilted her head. "A company?" He nodded once. "Something like that." There was a heaviness in his tone that made her drop the subject. The next day, Ethan asked her a question instead. "Why nursing, Clara? You could have done anything." She paused. "Because people forget that being seen can heal more than medicine can. I wanted to be the kind of person I once needed." He studied her for a moment, the corners of his eyes softening. "That is rare. Most people stop caring when the world does not care back." She smiled. "Then I guess we both are rare." That night, something unexpected happened. As she prepared to leave, Ethan spoke quietly. "Clara, would you do me a favor? Play that piece again, the one from your mother." She hesitated, then nodded. When the music filled the room, Ethan closed his eyes and whispered, almost to himself. I had forgotten what peace sounded like. Clara kept playing until his breathing steadied, and the monitor settled into its calm rhythm. From that night on, their conversations deepened. They spoke of childhood memories, lost dreams, and second chances. Ethan told her about a woman he had loved and lost to a medical error, a mistake that had left him bitter toward every hospital, every doctor. He admitted that when he first arrived at St. Mary's, he had refused to speak to anyone, but her patience had cracked something open inside him. "I stopped believing people could be kind without reason," he said. "Then you proved me wrong." Clara looked at him, her throat tight with emotion. "I just did my job." He shook his head. "No, you gave me back the will to fight." Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city. The rain against the window matched the heartbeat on the monitor. Clara stayed until well past midnight, listening as Ethan drifted into sleep. When she finally stood to leave, she looked once more at the man in the bed, the patient who was slowly becoming more than a name on her chart. She turned off the lamp, leaving only the soft light of the machines, and whispered, "Good night, Mr. Hale." Oh. As she stepped into the hallway, she did not know that the greatest truth about him was still hidden, waiting to change everything she thought she knew about kindness, love, and the man she was helping to heal. It happened on a quiet Thursday morning, when the world outside St. Mary's Hospital was still gray with fog. Clara Monroe arrived early, carrying her violin case and a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. She pushed through the double doors of the recovery wing, smiling at the familiar sound of monitors beeping in rhythm. When she reached room 406, she paused. The door was half open, and voices echoed from inside. Dr. Harris stood near the bed, speaking with two administrators in dark suits. Ethan Hale was sitting upright, fully dressed in a crisp button-down shirt instead of a hospital gown. He looked healthier, stronger, as if he had walked out of a different life overnight. When his eyes met hers, there was a flicker of something unreadable guilt, or maybe hesitation. Dr. Harris turned toward her. "Clara, perfect timing. Mr. Hale has just been discharged. His recovery has exceeded every expectation." Clara blinked in surprise. "Already? But his therapy will continue elsewhere," Harris interrupted, his tone polite but final. Ethan's gaze softened. "Thank you, Nurse Monroe. You have done more for me than you know." She nodded, forcing a smile. It should have been a happy moment, but something in her chest felt heavy. After they left, the room seemed colder, emptier, as if all the warmth had been carried out with him. 2 days later, the truth arrived not from him, but from a television screen in the hospital cafeteria. A news anchor's voice played over footage of a charity gala. Pharmaceutical magnate Ethan Hale, founder and chief executive officer of HaleMed Industries, made his first public appearance last night since his surgery at St. Mary's Hospital. Clara froze mid-step, the tray trembling in her hands. The camera zoomed in on the man. She knew the same calm eyes, the same steady voice, but now he was surrounded by lights, microphones, and a sea of elegant people. He was not just a patient. He was a billionaire. He was the man who owned the very hospital where she worked. The realization hit like cold water. Every memory replayed the questions he had asked, the way he listened, the secrets he had never shared. He had known exactly who she was all along, yet she had never known who he truly was. Later that night, she walked back into room 406. The bed was empty, the machine silent. On the nightstand lay a folded note with her name written neatly across the front. She hesitated before opening it. Clara, you reminded me of what humanity looks like when power and grief blind a man to it. I wanted to tell you who I was, but I needed you to see me as a person, not as a name or a company. Thank you for that. Ethan Hale. She stood there for a long time, the paper trembling in her fingers. The man she had stayed late to comfort, the one she had thought was alone in the world, was not only powerful but also the owner of the empire that supplied every medicine in the building. For the rest of that evening, she went through her shift like a ghost. Her coworkers congratulated her on saving the life of a legend, but their words only deepened the ache in her chest. He had trusted her enough to listen, but not enough to tell the truth. And somehow, that hurt more than she expected. When her shift ended, Clara stepped outside into the night air. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, and in the distance she thought she heard the echo of a violin, her own melody, played back by memory. She whispered to the sky, "Why did you not tell me, Ethan?" The wind answered only with silence. In that moment, standing under the rain that blurred the city's glow, Clara realized she was not angry because he was rich. She was hurt because he had hidden behind that silence, the same silence she had once broken to reach him. Now, it had taken him back, and she was left with nothing but music and unanswered questions. For several days after Ethan Hale's revelation, Clara Monroe moved through St. Mary's Hospital as if in a dream she could not wake from. The news had spread quickly. Every nurse, every doctor, every patient seemed to whisper his name with awe. Did you hear? The man in room 406 was Ethan Hale, the billionaire who owns HaleMed. Clara tried to ignore them, but each word felt like a small cut she could not hide. She worked her shifts quietly, keeping her head down. When someone congratulated her on making an impression on the boss, she only smiled weakly and changed the subject. What they did not know was that she had not heard from him since that day. No call, no message, no letter beyond the one he left on the nightstand. One evening, as she was finishing her paperwork, the head nurse entered the station holding a sealed envelope. "Clara, this came for you," she said, placing it on the desk. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, and sharp. Clara opened it hesitantly. "Miss Monroe, you are requested to attend the HaleMed Foundation Gala this Friday evening at the Grand Wyndham Hotel. Your presence is important. Please consider this a formal invitation." There was no signature, only a gold seal embossed with the HaleMed logo. Her heart pounded. Why would they invite her? Was this his way of apologizing, or just another public gesture from a man used to control? Friday came faster than she expected. Her coworker, Anna, lent her a simple navy blue dress and a pair of heels that were half a size too small. "You look beautiful," Anna said, smiling. "Go show them what kindness looks like." Hoo-hoo. Clara forced a laugh, but her stomach was tight with unease. When she arrived at the Grand Wyndham, the marble lobby gleamed under chandeliers. Cameras flashed. Reporters called out names she did not recognize. Inside the ballroom, a massive banner read HaleMed Annual Charity for Humanitarian Care. She stood near the back, feeling out of place among the polished guests and glittering gowns. Then the crowd quieted as Ethan Hale took the stage. He looked every bit the man she had seen on television, confident, composed, the weight of power returned to his shoulders. Yet when his gaze swept across the audience and found her, something softened in his expression. He began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate not profit but purpose. Months ago, I was a patient at St. Mary's Hospital. I had lost faith in medicine, in people, in life itself. But one person reminded me that healing is not only about science, it is about compassion." The crowd leaned forward, listening. That person is Nurse Clara Monroe. A spotlight found her. Every head turned. Clara froze, her heart racing as applause filled the room. Ethan continued, his voice steady. She did not know who I was. She saw only a man in pain, and she chose to stay. Because of her, the HaleMed Foundation will begin a new initiative, the Clara Fund, for nurses who go beyond duty to serve with humanity. The applause thundered. Clara blinked back tears, unable to move. She wanted to feel proud, but all she could think was that he had turned their private truth into a public stage. After the event ended, Ethan found her near the exit. "Clara," he said softly, "I meant every word." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "You could have told me sooner. You did not have to hide." He sighed. "I wanted you to see me without the armor of wealth. I was afraid you would not stay if you knew." She shook her head. "You were wrong, Ethan. I stayed because you were human, not because you were hidden." He reached out as if to touch her arm, but she stepped back gently. "Good night, Mr. Hale," she said, using his title once more. Then she turned and walked away, leaving him standing beneath the glittering lights, alone in a room full of people. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. Clara looked up at the city skyline, the noise of applause fading behind her. For the first time since she met him, she did not feel small. She felt hurt, but she also felt free, the kind of freedom that comes from knowing her kindness had changed something, even if her heart still ached for what could never be. The week after the gala passed in silence. The city kept moving, the hospital kept breathing, but inside Clara Monroe, everything had gone still. Her coworkers still whispered about her name being mentioned on stage, yet none of it felt real. She had not spoken to Ethan Hale since that night. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. But the messages were always from patients, family, or shift reminders, never from him. One late afternoon, after a long day of double shifts, Clara sat in the hospital garden during her short break. The winter air bit at her skin, but she welcomed the chill. It helped her stay awake, helped her stop thinking about the ache she carried. She watched a pair of sparrows hopping between the benches and smiled faintly. Her mother used to say, "When life gets heavy, look for small signs of grace." For weeks, that sentence had been her anchor. Then a voice broke the quiet. "You always did like staying after hours." Clara turned sharply. Ethan Hale stood a few steps away, dressed in a dark coat, his expression softer than she remembered. "How did you—" she began, but he raised a hand. "I spoke with Dr. Harris. I wanted to see you, but I did not want to disturb your work." She stood, uncertain whether to be angry or relieved. "I thought you had said everything at the gala," she said carefully. He nodded. "I said what the world needed to hear, not what you deserved to hear." He stepped closer. "I owe you an apology. I should have told you the truth earlier. I was afraid that if I did, the kindness you showed me would feel conditional." Clara crossed her arms. "You thought I would treat you differently because of your money?" "Yes," he admitted. "Most people always have." She shook her head slowly. "You do not understand, Ethan. What hurt was not who you were. It was that you did not trust me enough to tell me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of traffic hummed in the distance, mixed with the faint chirp of the birds. Ethan looked down, his voice quiet. "I built an empire to protect myself from loss. When my wife died, I promised never to rely on anyone again. Then you walked into that room and treated me like I still mattered." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I do not know how to thank you without ruining it." Clara's throat tightened. "You already have," she said softly. "You created a fund that will help thousands of nurses. That is enough." He smiled faintly, but the sadness in his eyes remained. "I did not do it for publicity. I did it because your kindness reminded me of the man I used to be." The wind rustled through the bare branches overhead. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I know you do not want gifts, but this is not about money." Oh. Inside was a photograph, an old picture of a music hall, restored and glowing with light. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Reserved for the Clara concert." He explained, "HaleMed sponsors community projects. This one will hold free recitals every month. I hoped you would play the opening night." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "You did this for me?" "For what you represent," he said gently. "For every person who believes kindness is still powerful." "Oh." Clara looked at him, her heart torn between gratitude and lingering hurt. She wanted to believe him, but part of her still feared being a symbol instead of a person. She took a deep breath and said, "I need time, Ethan. I am grateful, but I cannot pretend everything is fine." He nodded with quiet understanding. "I will wait," he said simply, "no matter how long it takes." As he turned to leave, the light from the setting sun caught the edges of his coat, wrapping him in a faint golden glow. Clara stood alone in the garden, holding the photograph. For the first time, she did not feel betrayed. She felt seen. And somewhere inside her, a small seed of forgiveness began to grow slowly, like dawn after a long night. Winter melted slowly into spring, and the rhythm of St. Mary's Hospital carried on. Clara Monroe threw herself into her work, focusing on her patients, her classes, and her volunteer hours at the community clinic. The ache she once felt began to fade, replaced by a quiet steadiness. Every now and then, she would glance at the photograph Ethan Hale had given her, the music hall glowing with warm light, and wonder if he had truly meant what he said. Weeks later, she received an envelope marked with the Hale Med seal. Inside was a single line: "Opening night, Saturday at 7. The stage is waiting." Her first instinct was to ignore it, but something in her heart, that small seed of forgiveness, urged her to go. When the evening came, Clara stood backstage at the renovated hall. The air smelled of polished wood and new beginnings. Rows of seats stretched before her, filled with families, nurses, and patients she recognized from the hospital. Ethan was there too, standing near the front row, not as a corporate giant but as a man watching with quiet hope. Clara lifted her violin and took a slow breath. As the first note echoed through the hall, she felt her nerves dissolve. The melody rose like a memory, soft, steady, full of the same compassion that had once filled a lonely hospital room. When she finished, the audience rose in applause. Ethan's eyes shone with pride, but he did not approach her immediately. He waited, giving her space to choose what came next. After the crowd began to leave, Clara walked toward him. Her voice was calm, her smile genuine. "You kept your promise," she said. He nodded. "And you kept your faith." For a long moment, they simply stood there in the gentle hum of the empty hall. Two people who had walked through silence, misunderstanding, and healing, and somehow met again in forgiveness. In that quiet, Clara realized she had found something far more powerful than apology or wealth. She had found peace. The following spring, St. Mary's Hospital held its first charity concert under the name the Clara Fund Gala. The music hall glowed under soft golden light, filled with doctors, nurses, and patients who had once felt forgotten. Clara Monroe stood on stage in a simple white dress, her violin resting gently beneath her chin. As she played, the melody wove through the air like a prayer, steady, healing, and full of gratitude. Every note carried a memory: the quiet nights, the beeping monitors, and the man who had once been just another patient in room 406. When the last chord faded, the hall erupted in applause. Ethan Hale stepped onto the stage, his expression tender and proud. He carried a small velvet box in one hand. Clara's breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a silver violin bow, engraved with the words, "For the listener who healed me." Ethan's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "I spent years building walls to protect myself from pain. You broke them down with kindness. You reminded me that healing begins not with medicine, but with listening." The audience grew silent. He took a slow step closer. "Clara Monroe, will you allow me to share the rest of my life with you?" Tears glistened in her eyes. For a moment, she could not speak. Then she nodded, smiling through the emotion that filled her chest. "Yes, Ethan, I will." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping as Ethan slipped the silver bow into her hands. The lights dimmed, the music swelled, and the camera flash captured the two of them standing together on the stage, no longer nurse and patient, but two people who had chosen love over loneliness. Outside, rain began to fall softly over the city, the same gentle rhythm that had once filled a quiet hospital room. Clara looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mama. You were right. Kindness really does heal everything." And in that moment, surrounded by music, applause, and the man who had once been lost in silence, Clara knew she had found what her heart had been waiting for all along: love, peace, and the beautiful proof that compassion can change the world.